Operations, Safety, and Security Committee. It will come to order. I'm the chair of the committee, Troy Whitmore. We are convened as of 5:31 p.m. I would respectfully ask all in attendance to please mute yourself unless you are recognized to speak. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Please note that the committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practical on the board's website. During today's meeting, we are also providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Also, a live stream of this meeting is available via RTD's YouTube page. At this time, I'd like to call the roll of the committee members. Vice Chair Julian Bouquet.
Present.
Director Ian Harwick.
I'm here.
Director Jamie Lewis.
Present.
Director Paul Rosenthal.
Present.
Director Joanne Ruscia. She will not be joining us tonight due to a meeting conflict. Director Marjorie Sloan.
Here.
Thank you very much. And I'm Troy Whitmore, also present. So for the record, I see that we have 6 directors present. And I'd like to now open up the meeting to public comment for anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you'd like to be contacted regarding your public comment, feel free once again to email the RTD board office. Again, rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. Staff will unmute you when it's your turn to speak, and if you're dialed in, press the *6 to toggle your mute settings. So, Mr. Kroll, do you see any hands raised from our audience that would like to speak during the public hearing portion of the meeting?
Yes, Director Whitmore. At this time, this is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. We have one individual who has raised their hand indicating a desire to provide public comment, and that is Richard Bamber.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cole. Richard Bamber, the floor is yours for 3 minutes. Proceed, sir.
Hi there. Good evening, everybody. Richard Bamber, Greater Denver Transit. Really good to see in the agenda tonight a piece from staff about how we're finally going to make improvements to our digital displays, signage, something that's been sorely lacking on the system for a number of years. I'd like you to, I'm going to listen to the presentation with much interest, follow this. It's a very, very key part to having a great transit system. But I'd like to point out one thing, okay? Nobody ever said, do you know what? Singapore, Berlin, Tokyo has a great transport system because of the adverts. I'm not going to stand here today and say we should get rid of them. Okay, I understand they're necessarily evil. I understand that when you're trying to balance books, they do contribute. Okay, but all I would say is everybody be really, really careful when you mix them in the environment. It is very easy to get wrong and difficult to get right. And yeah, it can be done, but please pay a lot of attention, because if it's done badly, the rider experience can actually be made worse, even though you've spent all this money and resources on these nice signs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bamber. As always, we appreciate your comments. Mr. Kroll, any other additional speakers for public comment?
Yes, Committee Chair Whitmore, I do not see any further individuals present who have indicated a desire to provide public comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kroll. Secondly, in regard to public comment, I do believe we have received 2 emails for the committee and perhaps the whole board. If you'd like to just mention who they came from and the general topic, please, I would appreciate that.
Of course, Committee Chair Whitmore. So the board received 2 emailed public comments this evening. One is from Chris Nicholson, who is a candidate for RTD Director in District A, and he had some comments around the public-facing signage conversation you all will have later this evening. The second was from Greater Denver Transit, who was represented previously by Richard Bamber here. And that letter contains comments on all of the items on this evening's agenda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kroll. So with no other participants in the queue and no other emails, I will declare that the public comment portion of the meeting is concluded. Item C, information from external entities. There are no external entity reports this evening. Recommended actions, item D. There are no recommended actions on the agenda this evening. However, we move to item E, discussion items, and we have three very important discussion items for committee consideration this evening. And we look forward to that very much. And as mentioned just a few moments ago, the first item is our customer-facing signage and schedule information. We're really excited to hear from Stuart Summers, our Chief Communications and Engagement Officer, in regard to this program. So, Mr. Summers, the floor is yours for your presentation. Please proceed.
Thank you, Committee Chair Whitmore. I'm going to share my screen. I just want to confirm that everyone's able to see my screen. Awesome. Good evening, Committee Chair Whitmore, members of the Operations Safety and Security Committee, and other board members present this evening. As mentioned, my name is Stuart Summers. I am the Chief Communications and Engagement Officer here at RTD. And tonight I'm going to provide an informational update about RTD's customer-facing signage and schedule information and some enhancements that have been made recently and some near-term projects that are underway to continually improve the customer experience. I'm also joined this evening by my colleagues in bus and rail operations and capital programs, all of whom play a role in RTD's signage efforts. So for the outline of my presentation this evening, 4 different things we'll talk about. First, I want to give an overview of RTD's signage. Secondly, talk about some of those improvement projects that are underway. Provide an update about service alerts and mobile apps and some changes that we've made and some enhancements. And then lastly, provide the board with an update about some bus station or rail station and bus stop assessments that we also have underway here at RTD. So I think it's important to first start out with the goals of our customer-facing signage at RTD. First and foremost, it's wayfinding and navigation. We want to make sure that people can identify the station or stop, understand the entrances and exits, connections to points of interest in the area. Secondly, and also just as important, service information, the schedules, disruptions, fares, the prices, boarding instructions. Third is personal safety and security, the goal of ensuring that everyone understands the customer code of conduct, respect the ride, any emergency notices, safety instructions. And then lastly, I put this on here as a goal as well, is promoting our own agency. So things like Zero Fare for Youth, our service changes, that we're hiring operators. We have a lot of different promotions that we use our signage to also promote RTD's efforts, partnerships and events that we have underway as an agency. There's 3 categories of signs at RTD. The first are static signs, shelter boards, and then digital signs, and I'll explain all 3. So static signs are meant to be mostly permanent. And I use permanent not in a forever sense, but they're not meant to change often. These identify the rail station, a bus stop, provide that wayfinding that I mentioned previously, connections to points of interest, share some of those conduct guidelines, and then communicate accessibility options and safety instructions for customers. Shelter boards are the print schedules that we put into the display cases, updated 3 times a year as part of our service changes. We currently have about 1,050 shelter board locations across the district, mostly at rail stations, but we also have them at select bus stops and park and rides. They display schedules, so you can walk up if you don't have a mobile device or access to the schedule in a digital format. You can walk up and get that schedule information. Also, the rail system maps, and then at select bus stops, we have some of the route maps as well. They also communicate fares, discount programs, provide language access information, and then contact information for our police dispatch, customer care, and civil rights. And we use QR codes, URLs, and phone numbers to communicate this information. And then the last category are digital signs. And I'm going to take probably the majority of tonight's presentation to provide that update about the digital signs. And we further break this down into 3 subcategories: variable message signs, or VMS, public information displays, or PIDs, and then universal advertising totems, or UATs. So the VMS are the things that RTD owns and operates and maintains, installed at light rail and commuter rail platforms. These are those scrolling things of text that have 1 to 3 lines of text with the schedule information or service disruptions. The PIDs are installed at predominantly a lot of our bus facilities. So underground bus concourse, they display, must-know information, schedule information. We also have a number of these that are employee-facing as well in a lot of our divisions and operational facilities. And then lastly, new to the system are our totems. And so these are at rail platforms, select bus stops coming soon, and then they have schedule information, agency promotions, and advertising as well. This is just some examples of some of the PIDs at some of our bus facilities. So in the underground bus concourse, we're all very familiar. There's dozens of these, screens above the different gates providing schedule information, as well as Civic Center and the downtown Boulder stations. And now some exciting updates about some improvement projects underway. So on light rail, this is where I want to focus on the VMS. So the information that's displayed, as you can see in this picture, is the same schedule information that a customer would find in the Next Ride app. And at RTD, we use predicted times, if available, and then the backup option, if the predicted times are not available, it defaults to scheduled times of what's been the schedule. Predicted times utilize track sensors. This is a less reliable form of the schedule information. So essentially, there's little sensors in the rail, and when the wheels or the tires of the light rail make contact with those sensors, it sends a signal to say a train has just passed this point on the track. Now, as you can imagine, these sensors are not frequent enough that you could have a reliable, like GPS, sort of understanding of where the vehicle is at. We're transitioning now to GPS, so Global Positioning System. It's currently being installed on our light rail vehicles. This will greatly enhance a lot of this real-time information about where our vehicles are at, where our rail vehicles are at. Last fall in 2023, we also updated our VMS to start showing service alerts. So if you've been on the system recently, you can look up at the screen and see cancellations, station closures, bus shuttles that are underway. And then all of these VMS also have the text-to-speech option. And so if we have a major disruption or something larger, more significant, they can actually utilize a text-to-speech and speak out what that disruption may be. Commuter rail VMS use predicted countdown in minutes to the next departure. So light rail uses a schedule and commuter rail uses a countdown. And so if a predicted feed is not available, it also reverts to the scheduled countdown. And then if a trip is canceled, it just goes to the next trip and just adds that time to when the next train will be arriving. And then also similar to light rail, we have that text-to-speech audio announcement capability on our commuter rail platforms. Now, something I know this board is very familiar with, we hear this a lot, especially in public comment, are VMS that are not operational, ones that are not working, and it causes frustration for customers. And we hear that often and we understand. The variable message signs are original to our light rail system. We know that in October of this year, we'll be celebrating the 30th anniversary of light rail, and that tells you how old this technology is. Many of these signs are beyond their useful life. They're often out of service. It's very difficult to source parts, to find replacements. And so when we learn about one that's not working, the challenge is we either have to take parts from another one to get it operational, or we have to just take it out of service. Happy to report that in March of this year, we received our first shipment of 30 new VMS. We've prioritized installing those new VMS along all of the light rail platforms that will be impacted by the upcoming maintenance projects. So downtown rail reconstruction, as well as the coping panels. Our goal before the May service change is to have one working VMS at every platform by May 27th. Then we have an additional order of new VMS as well. So addition to these 30 that we received in March, additional that are on their way so we can continue to replace across the entire system. We've set a goal for April of next year to have every VMS replaced and operational. And there's about 110 across the system. So that kind of gives you an idea that we have 30 new ones in March, and we have to get to about 110 by next April. And then the totems, the UATs. So all the costs associated with these walk-up screens rest with our vendor and our system advertising agreement. It's a 10-year agreement that was signed in 2022. As part of that agreement, they install and maintain and operate these walk-up totems. They provide schedule information at this point, but similar to what we have under Works, we also want to roll out later this summer real-time information on them. I was in a meeting yesterday and we were talking about the font size on these walk-up totems. I know that was something that came in public comment, and we've already sent in a request to have the font size improved and to make some adjustments to make sure that customers are able to easily see that schedule information. And so the font will be adjusted. 50% of the screen's content is reserved for agency information. So we have a share of voice in 10-second rotations, as well as we also get a share of the advertising in the sense that we can use it to promote some of our campaigns like hiring, Zero Fare for Youth, and service changes. The first totem was installed on May 9th of last year. It was our pilot installation. As of last month, we have 61 that have been installed at REL platforms. 45 additional are in the planning stage, just waiting final approval to be installed. By the end of the year, our goal is to have 130 UATs installed across the system. And then depending on the location, some platforms will include multiple double-sided screens. Depending on the size of the platform, we'll have some different parameters. The vendor submits a separate installation proposal for each location. And that's really important for us because we want to make sure when we're thinking about our customer experience that we're very closely involved with where are we going to put these totems that make the most sense, that don't block traffic flow. Customers can walk up and get the information they need to have a successful trip. So they have to receive staff approval prior to any of the installations going in the ground. And then the next 3 slides just show you some of the locations we currently have those UATs installed, or those totems. So you can see on the D line, the E line, and the H line, the colored in dots indicate where we have these totems currently in the ground. L, R, and W, you can see we have a significant number along the R line that have gone in the ground, and then working our way through the W line as well. And then for the A, B, and G, as we all know, this is part of our concessionaire agreement, and so we're just working with DTO. We have a request into them of where we want to do the installations and just working through that process prior to installation. But we have plans for the A, B, and G, which also includes Denver Union Station to have a number of them deployed across the commuter and light rail platforms. And then you can see on the N line, all but Denver Union Station currently has a totem installed at it. Next, I want to talk about service alerts and some of our updates to our mobile applications. So our NextRide app, this is our web-based app that's available in multiple languages. You can see service alerts by bus route, rail line, station, facility, commute section. You can display predicted arrival times for the different modes. And so if we don't have a predicted time, like I mentioned earlier, it defaults to schedule. The other thing that's handy that I know a lot of customers use is in that commute section, you can actually see where the vehicle is in as close to real time as possible. So our buses have GPS. You can see where they at if they're coming around the corner, coming down the street. And then also, like I mentioned with the light rail, those track sensors where that light rail last made contact with a sensor. We currently have more than 300,000 unique users a month on the NextRide app, planning more than 1 million trips. And I think this is a quite impressive thing to think about, that we have a significant number of people using this NextRide app. I don't have this in my slide, but I'm going to pause and say we recognize also that we have a lot of apps that can cause confusion for customers. We have MyRide, NextRide, Transit Watch. And so we have a project also underway to have one app to rule all apps. And so we're going through a scope of work right now to combine them all together, because we want to try and make this as easy as possible for all customers. We've made some upgrades to our trip planning functionality. And so later this month, we will be adding embedded on the home screen, the option to plan a trip right off RTD's website. Currently, you have to click off the website to go to the NextRide app. We're going to embed that into the homepage so you don't have to leave rtd-denver.com. You can also plan trips for future dates and times. And so all of the schedules for the upcoming May service change and the disruptions have been loaded. So we've been encouraging customers to start thinking ahead, planning their trip for a future date to see, what mode would be best for them. We also recently rolled out an option to purchase fare through the NextRide. And so you can see the total cost of your trip and you can click in to purchase your fare. When it's planning a trip, obviously it takes into consideration the trip status and any disruptions. And so it's planning your total trip time. And then I know a number of people listening to this call will be happy to know that later this year, we'll be upgrading to Open Trip Planner 2.x, which allows us to factor in bus shuttles for our rail trips. And so if we have a bus bridge or a bus shuttle in place, you can actually plan your trip and understand what impact that will have on your total trip time, especially if you're trying to make a connection or get out to the airport, especially. And then lastly, I want to just talk about some assessments we have underway. So in March of this year, we launched a customer amenities and experience review is what we're calling it. And we're starting with the 25 light rail stations that have the highest customer boardings, excluding Denver Union Station and anything in the downtown loop, just because we know that there'll be some disruptions this summer. So we're starting with the 25 that have the highest customer boardings. And we have staff going out to look at all of the amenities, including signage, and really try to understand what does this portray? How does this impact the customer experience? So we're looking at things like benches and trash cans and lighting and audio equipment and the branding and the paint colors and all these different things, because right now we're focused on all of the different customer profiles that we're building out. So if you're a first-time user of the system, a first-time customer, and you go up to that platform, what does that tell you? If you are a daily commuter and you use that platform regularly, you go up to that station regularly, what does that tell you? If you have a customer in need of language assistance, what does that tell you as well when you walk up? Or a customer with disabilities. We want to make sure that we are thinking about the customer journey from multiple lenses as part of this assessment. And the goal is to identify some potential improvements that we can use to enhance this customer journey, this customer experience, and implement it across the entire system. So this is underway right now. There's also an assessment of DUS wayfinding. We all know that DUS is challenging to navigate if you're a first-time customer, especially with light rail and commuter rail and understanding the difference. And so in 2016, an assessment was done. This is going to update that and build upon it. So we have a contractor that is going through this with us, assessing our wayfinding elements, helping us understand the customer journey, where these different decision points happen across the different platforms, using iconography in our signage so that people that maybe have limited English can see identifiable symbols to understand, how to get to the airport or how to get to additional trains or the bus concourse. All this, in addition, is to just support that welcoming transit environment and support our customers at what should be and what is our crown jewel of RTD. And then lastly, in relation to our bus stops. So we know that we have 9,700 plus bus stops in the 8-county service area. Currently, about 8,200 are active. Most of these stops are simply a pole and signage, or what we call a flag. And RTD owns and maintains approximately 300 of these. So we have the challenge and the opportunity to work with local municipalities, CDOT, adjacent property owners for the vast majority of these stops to understand how can we create a welcoming transit environment across the entire district. And so we have this infrastructure and accessibility assessment that will soon get underway. An active solicitation is currently underway right now that kicked off last month. We're expecting a notice to proceed in later this month here in May. And this will be a review of all 9,700 plus bus stops, trying to establish that comprehensive set of data, review some of those amenities we have, understand some of the accessibility gaps, and really just trying to identify some strategies so we can tackle how do we improve the entire transit experience for all customers, both bus and rail. And that concludes my prepared presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Summers. I really appreciate a good presentation. I know there's a lot of interest, and certainly we'll be calling on committee members, but I was neglectful at the beginning of the meeting. I apologize to the 4 other directors that were not introduced that are with us, and some of them had a very long meeting last night from what I understand. So I appreciate you guys being here as well. Certainly welcome to ask questions or ask for clarification. So we have Chair Davidson with us, First Vice Chair Peggy Catlin with us, Finance and Planning Committee Chair Tisdale, and Director Broom. Have I left off anybody? Oh, yes, and I just see that Director Guzman has come on camera. So welcome all 5 of you to the meeting, and I apologize for not following proper protocol. So with that, Mr. Summers, first question comes from Director Lewis. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Stuart, thank you for your work. I've got 4 quick questions. Hopefully they'll be quick. On the UATs or the totems that you guys have, was there any option for audio on those for our blind community?
I don't believe the current ones we have any audio option. That's something I can check into. I learned recently they have a camera feature in them, but I don't know much beyond the technology of the audio option, but it's something I'm happy to check into.
Okay. Second question, I know when you go on the light rail platform, we have those pre-recorded announcements. Have we ever gone as far as having real-time announcements on that, or do we have that technology yet?
So I'll start this answer. I know that Ms. Johnson can provide some additional content. Part of our assessment of these platforms and these stations is we're trying to understand which ones even have working speakers, trying to get some of that comprehensive data first before we start to venture into what improvements need to be made. But I'll let Ms. Johnson also provide some additional information about audio announcements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
Yes, thank you. So Mr. Summers iterated in his presentation that some of the technologies we have are very antiquated. While it is commonplace that we could possibly have a system that can be overwritten whereby announcements could come through our operations control center, traditionally we don't have that. There are some elements within commuter rail. I know Mr. Jensen is on screen. I would like him to speak to this, but what we're trying to do is ensure that we can provide state-of-the-art technology through intelligent transportation systems, and we are just in the process of being able to build that up, as a large emphasis was not placed on those components in previous years. So with that, Mr. Jensen, would you like to add some more color to the discussion?
Yes, if I can. It's really not adding much color to it other than to say that what you said was exactly right. The technology is limited at best, the speakers, so we don't have the capacity on light rail. Commuter rail is limited at best capacity for the which would be the control center to the station announcements, which is what I'm hearing you ask about. So, but we are working in that direction, and one day we hope to be able to have that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Continue, Director Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other 2 are more comments on your review of apps and the light rail station assessment. I'm hoping that you're including users with disabilities that can probably see or hear things that maybe the regular person may not observe on the platform. So I hope you're including somebody from ACPD or APAC on these tours to help identify those spots that maybe our staff wouldn't be privy to. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Lewis. Director Rosenthal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Summers, for that excellent presentation and for all the work that you and your team are doing on this to upgrade our system to make it more user-friendly. So a couple questions. Well, first an observation. One of the areas that I consistently hear a lot about our bus stops, whether they're operated by RTD or not, is garbage cans, needing shelters, needing benches, to the point that some in the community actually put out their own benches and garbage cans. So just, making sure that that's all part of the study that's going to be done. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
Yeah, so part of this assessment, we really need to get some of that just base understanding of all of the parameters we have, which stops and stations have amenities and which ones do not. The other thing that we've been trying really hard to do, and I can speak for Aurora specifically, I meet with Aurora regularly, is trying to understand some of those bus stops they have in Aurora that are, city owned, that maybe have some challenges, and then working with our team in collaboration with Aurora to address some of those challenges and help them understand, when we need a garbage to be dumped, or there's graffiti, or there's some sort of challenging situation that's springing up at a stop, how we can collaboratively address that to ensure that even if it's not our own stop, we have some ownership in that and making sure it's addressed properly.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may just add some more context.
Proceed.
Yes, thank you very kindly. Thank you, Director Rosenthal, for the question. I think it's important to note as we look at customer amenities at transit stops, they're critical factors that traditional transit agencies take into consideration. So when we talk about customer amenities and we talk about the level of trash receptacles or whether or not there are seating or leaning posts, it's contingent upon whether it's a transfer stop, what's the throughput relative to how many buses are servicing the area. So I just wanted to provide that context. And then more specifically, as we talk about who has auspices over the infrastructure, it's critically important to note that some of the infrastructure has not been adjusted in some municipalities because they've been grandparented in due to the American with Disabilities Act. So not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent, but I'm just trying to manage expectations as we go forward, because oftentimes there's a reluctance to put in a curb cut because there's other elements that need to be made to that specific area. So getting back to what Mr. Summers said and working on the assessment of the holistic network relative to the customer amenities and the stops and things of the like, we will be identifying what would be optimal within the parameters of boardings per hour and the throughput with routes. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager, for those additional details. I think that those are all very critical that not a lot of people don't know to keep in mind. And thank you, Mr. Summers, for reaching out to Aurora. I did hear from a couple city council members out there about some garbage at some bus stops. So, so this is certainly topical that you're doing this presentation and this analysis and these updates. The other question or request is bathrooms. I know that's a difficult one. That's probably costs quite a bit. You have maintenance costs and staffing costs, etc. But how might they also be included in the light rail station assessment?
Go ahead, GM CEO Johnson or Mr. Summers.
Can you repeat the question? Something popped up on my screen and I wasn't able to hear the entirety of the question.
That's quite all right. So something I do hear about also is the issue of bathrooms at our light rail stations particularly, and whether that might be something that could be included in light rail station assessment that is currently going to be done.
Thank you very much, Director Rosenthal, for the question. And Mr. Chair, I will proceed. Recognizing the configuration of our light rail stations, most of them don't lend themselves to have an active restroom. With that being said, as a backdrop, what's more importantly, as we look at where we are as a country from the vantage point of having restrooms, and with the advent of 9/11, most transit agencies did not provide access thereafter due to heightened security and things of the like. As we go forward, I can commit to assessing, but I want to keep in mind that as we look at the configuration of these stations and the way they were constructed in limited spacing, they're not a true transit station, because light rail is a lot different than heavy rail or a subterranean station that may lend itself having all the support mechanisms in place relative to utilities and plumbing and things of the like. So as the team and I progress, we can assess that. When I say assess that, assess the feasibility of that, but I can assure you, having worked in a different area of the country whereby questions have come up about increasing the envelopes for light rail stations and if we could put in fare gates, oftentimes there could be some limitations, but I'm just sharing that information, not to say that I'm not amenable to doing it, but letting you know we are working with what we have, and expanding any further would require additional real estate from other municipalities relative to infrastructure and throughput from a safety compliance vantage point as well.
Is that all, Director Rosenthal? Okay, thank you very much. Director Sloan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And great report. Exciting things are happening at our stops and stations. And I would like to affirm Director Rosenthal's comments about the bus stops, but I have a couple questions directed to the rail stations and the rail station assessments. First, I know it's not within the scope of this discussion, but I can't help saying again that we need to have signage to lead people to the light rail stations. And it's inadequate in some spaces. I know it requires dealing with CDOT, but it's important for people to be able to find the light rail stations. That's one thing. The other is, will the assessment also review the art at the station? Some, it's old and it's getting tattered. Maybe it doesn't even work. There's some that have movement to them. So will that be included in the assessment as well?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please proceed.
Yeah, thanks, Director Sloan, for that question. So this light rail assessment we have underway has approximately 50 questions that staff are going through, and they're taking pictures for each of these questions. And one of the questions is related to art at stations. And if that station has art, what's the, how does it look? Is it in need of some attention? And so they're really trying to go through, and right now we're just collecting information. We have no plans to do anything at this point other than we're collecting information, putting it all into one final report to then say, if we needed to start to address some of these things, what would that look like? But we need to have some of those common set of facts first. So, but art at stations is part of that assessment that they're doing, and taking pictures so we can start to catalog it.
Great, thank you. And one final thing, again, having to do with light rail stations, there was a program of little libraries at some of the stations. Is that going to be allowed to continue or just assessed in the current program?
That's part of the, Mr. Chair, if I may. Thank you. Director Sloan, that is part of the assessment, looking at all of the amenities we have. So if they have the little lending library, trying to understand, some of those things that just may be part of that platform experience. And then looking at really trying to say, how do we ensure that the experience is consistent across the entire network? We have a lot of disparate experiences depending on the station and the alignment. And so really trying to say, how do we ensure that a customer experience is similar across all of RTD?
Thank you. That's it. And I appreciate all your work on this.
Thank you, Director Sloan. Next in the queue, Director Harwick.
Hey, I'm just getting situated at home, so if somebody else wants to go ahead, if not, I'll just sit in the driveway and pull my questions from here.
We will go to Committee Vice Chair Bouquet to buy you some time, Director Harwick.
Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Bouquet, I am not surprised that you are in queue, and I'm glad to see that. Proceed.
Thank you, Chair. And I actually, am I coming in okay? My internet's been a battle. Cool. So first off, thank you, Mr. Summers, for the presentation. I've been barking up this tree, I think, for 2 years now. I'm really, really happy to see that we have a presentation, really excited about the progress we've made. My questions are more kind of just some clarification notes based on the presentation itself. So when it comes to the VMS displays, have those new ones already been installed?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm going to ask Dave Jensen, AGM of Rail Operations, to answer that question.
Go ahead, Mr. Jensen.
So yes and no. We're in the process of installing them. We were just recently receiving them. And so we've begun installing them. As Mr. Summers indicated, the first ones we will be doing were the ones that will be impacted by this summer's work. So yes, we've got them. Yes, we're beginning to install them. No, it's not complete yet.
Okay. And sorry if I'm okay with dialoguing. Most of my questions are revolving around potentially you, but Mr. Jensen answering these questions as well. So if I heard correctly, we did get a shipment of 30. And then by April of 2025, all 110 VMSs would be installed. And then if I also looked at the timeline correctly, I see summer of 2024 is the goal to have GPS hardware on each of our light rails. Is that correct?
Almost all correct. Yes. Mr. Chair, if I may dialogue back and forth. Yes, almost all correct. So the GPS, the sign information that you indicated is correct. The GPS is connected, or it exists. It's the communication link, and getting that all functional. That's where the challenge is. So we have GPS on the trains right now, but it is, again, like I said, that communication link that needs to be completed. Okay.
And as Mr. Summers presented, it should be more efficient. It should be more real time if it is GPS, which I heard correctly. I guess the other question is, so it sounded like the 30 new ones, the goal of these being installed specifically on stations that are going to be impacted by projects going on this summer. After that, what involves kind of the prioritization of the next, the next 80 or so of those that are going to be installed next? What is kind of the prioritization of where do we install, or is there even a plan going into the future of where those are going to be ultimately put?
Yeah, I don't have that list in front of me, so please give me room for some variance in that. Essentially, it will be based on usage or line corridors and staff availability. So if I've got a maintenance of way group, that's who's going to be doing that installing, and they'll be working in the southeast corridor because they've got other projects. We may want to complete the southeast corridor. But we know that we've got heavy use stations. Broadway should get done. Union Station obviously is one. The West Corridor, the W line is a priority for us. The downtown stations, we're working right now with our capital programs group and some of our advertising groups to determine which ones we do downtown, knowing that we've got extended period of work going on there. So the Welton Corridor, for instance, may be last. It could be downtown. So we do have a plan. We do have a list. It will be based on usage and our employee availability.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chair, for allowing me to dialogue, and thank you, Mr. Jensen, for answering the questions. Last statement, and then I'll be done. Why this matters so much is it's very much a choice rider district when it comes down to District G down here in the southeastern corridor. A lot of folks, I don't have evidence behind this, but anecdotally speaking, will either turn to our online schedule and then we'll show up to the light rail and we'll immediately look at these VMS systems. They will immediately look at these VMS signs and they'll say that is going to be determining when my ride is coming. And there is frustration when these are not in operation. So with folks, I do believe this does create a more welcoming transit environment for first-time riders in the Southeast Corridor specifically. I think of my Lincoln stations and my Ridgegate stations where folks are trying the light rail for the first time. So I'm very excited for this project. Thank you, Mr. Summers, for you and your team's effort, and thank you for all involved. I'm excited for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Before I allow a second bite at the apple with Director Lewis, I just had a numbers question for Mr. Summers or others. So the VMS is the oldest technology, correct? Okay, that's original to the light rail. So I know we've had some issues with that technology, and certainly the supply chain is maybe not even available for Mr. Summers' presentation. How many of those that are still hanging or upright are theoretically just inoperable, not working? Do you have a number, Mr. Summers?
I'm looking to Mr. Jensen because I know he's trying to do some math in his head right now.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't have that number and I don't want to misspeak. I would estimate, I'm a little reluctant to be overly.
So, Mr. Jensen, why don't we, if we can, Mr. Chair, why don't we circle back? This is a public meeting and I want to ensure that you all receive the information in which you're seeking. And I would much prefer that we do our due diligence and provide that information to you in a manner which could be useful as a point of reference.
Certainly, that's more than reasonable. I appreciate that.
Thank
And
you.
If Mr. Chair, if I may jump in
Yes.
for one more bit of information, what I can say is that every station has working signs. So that's the objective for us when we're going through which signs do work and which ones don't. If there were to be a station where none of the signs worked, we could take signs from another station and put them in the station that didn't work. So what I'm confident about is that at least we've got functional signs for every station. And if there is a case where none of them are working, we can repair that and get that switched out pretty quickly.
And theoretically, that is a short-term fix because we are doing complete renovation of those over the next, 12, 14 months?
Yes, it is. And what we are taking antiquated signage from one station and putting it into another station. We're literally taking the whole sign and swapping them out.
Okay.
So yes, short term.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. I see Director Harwick is in queue and ready. So the floor is yours, Director Harwick.
Thank you. Mr. Summers, I've got a few questions for you. So do we have a time, so obviously I represent the riders that ride the G line. Do we have any time frame with DTO? Do you have a sense of what we're looking at with them?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, and feel free to dialogue, Director Harwick, with the necessary staff.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Director Hardwick, I can tell you that we've submitted all of the proposals for the A, B, and G. It's in the hands of DTO right now, and they're just going through doing their due diligence to just understand, the placement and anything that may impact things on their side of operations. So I feel very positive. I heard as of last week that movement is happening, and they know that there's a sense of optimism and urgency to get this completed. So they understand that, and they feel the need to also help us get this done.
Cool. I'm just gonna stay on commuter rail. So we're doing an amenity study on the light rail. Will that sort of allow us to skip doing an amenity? I'm not being a turd. Will that allow us to skip doing an amenity study on commuter rail, or will we then later on do a commuter rail amenity study?
So Director Hardwick, the goal right now is to start with these 25 light rail platforms, recognizing that many of these are some of the oldest in the system and probably in need of some of the greatest enhancements and just an understanding of where we have some gaps and challenges. Eventually, we will then scale this to go across all 70 plus rail stations we have in the system. So right now we're just focused on 25. It's also part of, I don't want to call it a pilot, but really just trying to say if we do this assessment across the whole district, what kind of information would we gather? And so that's why we started with these 25 at this point. Also recognizing the N line's new, A, B, and G is fairly new. And so really trying to start with some of those that may have been forgotten along the way.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. On the totems, is there a way, because obviously we're pulling in some revenue from the ads, and I would not expect this right away, but like as a person that works for the city of Denver and interfaces with Dottie a lot, we're very aware of the who owns the bus stops. But I'm wondering, is there the opportunity to take this technology with the totems and then integrate it with future bus stop improvements? So saying hey, we've built a new shelter and we've included a totem built into the shelter. Is that something an answer to?
So as you're probably very familiar, some of our bus stops do have public information displays built into them, especially along the 15. And so those are all going through an update as well along the Flatiron Flyer and some of our routes that do have those screens at them. And those are going to be part of the same system eventually. So that's part of the plans as well, in addition to the totems, having some of these PIDs that would be added to some of the bus stops.
Cool. And then my last question deals with the totems again. I was approached by a constituent the other day who I think may or not be emailing with you. He was really he was thinking about like how we are sort of sometimes the first line of defense for those that are truly most in need. And the idea that he brought up to me was potentially using these totems to be able to provide, you know, contacts to like DHS or harm reduction or whatever kind of the various things that are fitting that. And I just want to take this where he had said that, and the thought that also came to my mind is also like as we are heading into, you know, very likely a very hot summer, you know, is that also that opportunity to utilize these totems to share information about, you know, we're in a heat wave, and if you need to seek out a cooling center in the summer or a warming shelter in the winter, like I understand this technology is probably not as malleable as I would like it to be, but I guess I just more want to put that out there and say if we could be thinking about how to really approach this from the most holistic standpoint, that would be really great. I'm done. Thank you, everybody, for letting me talk.
You're welcome. Good questions. All right, let's, since Director Lewis has had the first bite, I'm going to switch over. It looks like we have a committee member that has joined us. Director Rusha, we will give the floor to you, and then Director Tisdale, you'll be next. Director Rusha, floor is yours.
Hey everyone. I'm in my car but parked and car turned off. Director Harwick did not phone a friend. I was just tracking along via stream text after I got out of my meeting earlier. I just wanted to add that relative to digital displays, which we consider an amenity, we have fewer in equity neighborhoods than we do in non-equity neighborhoods, and that is particularly the case in Denver, which we identify like as nest neighborhoods. So I just wanted to kind of support what Director Harwick just said and also flag that for staff's consideration as we move through this project. And that's it. That was my comment.
Thank you very much. All right, let's move to Mr. Summers, did you have a comment?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I was
Please.
just going to mention that I do have a meeting set up with the individual that Director Harwick referenced, and so he and I will be meeting to talk about maybe some of these connections to resources and outreach with our staff. So that meeting is going to be coming up.
All right, thank you for that factoid. Let's move to Director Doug Tisdale. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 questions that I'd like to ask, and I might just pose them all together to avoid dialoguing on this and allow Mr. Summers or whomever to respond. But the first one, relative to the VMS, I note on packet page 18, it says that the goal is to have one working VMS, excuse me, at every platform. And I guess my question is, how are we supposed to know which is the one that's working as opposed to the ones that are not working? So is there some kind of indication that will be provided relative to that? Second question, relative to the totems, which I happen to love and think are a great adjunct to what we're doing here. The discussion appeared to be that the ads are essentially just our own promotional ads as opposed to third-party ads. And I know we have an advertising policy that would control what can go on there. And I'm equally aware that there is a revenue stream, speaking of revenue diversification, that is available from the sale of ads. And so I'd like to know if we have a ratio relative to the totems on ads, or whether we are simply using all of that ad time for ourselves. The third question is, all of us have traveled around the country and have been to agencies where they have in their bus stops, let alone at their train stations, digital maps, real-time displays, creative, even humorous ads on these things and so forth. So my question is, are you jealous? So those are my three questions that I pose, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Summers or Mr. Jensen. Please tackle those three questions or others as needed.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll start with the first one and maybe ask Mr. Jensen just to add in. So that goal of having one working for every station, that was the goal prior to submitting this packet. I think we've now achieved that goal of having the one working that Mr. Jensen referenced earlier, of one VMS working at every rail platform. So prior, when we were putting this packet together, I don't think we'd firmed that up, but we now have that completed. And the way to tell if it's working is it's displaying text. So the ones that aren't working just look like they've been turned off. Yep. And so that's how you know that they're working. Is there anything else, Mr. Jensen, to add to that? So customers that walk up to a platform can look up, and if it's displaying text, it's an operable VMS. You did note correctly, Director Tisdale, about the minimum annual guarantee, or our MAG, that we have with our system advertising. It provides that MAG every year to RTD. As part of that is this digital advertising, including the totems and our vehicle wraps and other advertising at stations and stops. We have that minimum annual guarantee and then an additional 70-30 split above it. And so we also have advertising space that's held back for RTD as well in that rotation. So in addition to the 50-50 share of voice, we also have advertising that's set aside for us to do things like Zero Fare for Youth, hiring operators, things of that nature. And then, yes, we're jealous when somebody does something creative.
All right, thank you for your questioning format, Director Tisdale. All right. Well, I see Secretary Guzman has raised his hand, and we'll get back to Director Lewis and Director Ruscia after Director Guzman makes his comments or questions. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the ones that we have tested out. I'm particularly thinking of the one at Federal and Decatur. Have we noticed how they are treated as an asset in terms of what we see at bus stops, you know, damage to the maps, damage to the flat signage? And just a reality, right? Like, are we replacing these every 3 months? Are they in good operating condition? Are they protected in such a way that it's unlikely that they'll be damaged? And I might have misunderstood, but it sounded like because this is through a vendor, it's their responsibility to fix it if it goes down. I'm specifically thinking of the UATs, sorry, Mr. Jensen, not the VMSs, but thank you for getting those done because we've had many conversations about that before. But with the UATs, what does that look like?
Mr. Jensen or Mr. Summers, would you like to comment, please?
Yeah, I would like to. So for example, the one at Federal Decatur, the UAT. So we've had some damage done to some of these walk-up totems. Probably not as much as some people anticipated. You know, anytime you have an amenity out in the public, you know, it's at the risk of being damaged or, you know, broken. All of that responsibility is with the vendor, though. So they are in charge of replacing, maintaining, installing, all of that. So it's on them if there is damage done to it. And so we've reported a couple that have had some challenges, screens that have cracks in them or color that's not clearly displaying, and they've come out and replaced them very quickly. So.
All right, that's all for Secretary Guzman, it appears. All right, we will move back to Director Lewis. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I had a question on the bus stop inventory, and I apologize because I've only been on a few months, but I'm just curious, is this a precursor to a cost analysis? And the reason why I bring that up, taking on this type of project is going to be very costly. And having the numbers and what it's going to cost to maybe have some of these amenities needs to be in a cost-sharing approach with our local municipalities, state and local governments. So am I making a true statement here that this is kind of like a precursor to a cost analysis?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Proceed.
Yeah, so basically the intent of this bus stop assessment is to garner an understanding of what we currently have holistically. This is an assessment so we can have an informed set of facts. And this is a study that we undertook by utilizing federal dollars in which to do so. Our intent is to share this with our partners in various municipalities as we move forward so we can garner a better understanding of what might be optimal. Recognizing that we are in an active solicitation period, I don't want to delve too deeply into what it is that we would hope to ascertain as people are formulating their submittals, but keeping in mind that we want to ensure that the consultant that's selected can look at optimal models that we can leverage and what might be ideal for our service area as a whole. It is customary when one provides transit services to a metropolitan area that is comprised of multiple jurisdictions, that the ownership of the assets does not rest with the public transit agency. And that's critically important for us to understand so we can set a path forward on what we may be able to do, recognizing that there is going to be cost involved. So that would be something that should come full circle. And sorry, I'm being a little cagey, but as I said, we're in an active solicitation process.
Thank you, CEO Johnson. I appreciate the answer.
You're welcome. Mr. Soroy, I see you on camera. Is there anything else that you wanted to elaborate on?
Just going to add, because it is in the scope and it is advertised, so it's out there, but we do have part of it is the extensive coordination with local jurisdictions and developing a framework for future investment in bus stops. So those two things are going to be addressed as part of this effort.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the answers to Director Lewis's question. All right, Director Arusha, you are up next.
Thank you, sir. I just had a clarifying question regarding Mr. Summers' comment in terms of the split and how much we control. Was it 30% or was there an additional percent? Could I just get clarification? Like what I'm trying to get at is under our existing contracts, like how much of that advertising space, can RTD use for, what we deem is an appropriate purpose? I just want a clarification on that.
Mr. Summers.
Thank you. Thanks, Director Arusha, for the question. So we're going to provide back a memo because I don't want to misspeak about the exact percentage because it's very prescriptive, but the share of voice are those 50-50, 10-second rotations. And then additionally, RTD has an additional amount of content, promotional materials that we can provide in the rotation outside that 50-50 scheduling. So we can provide back what those breakdowns are and how it's prescripted out. But yeah, we definitely utilize all the space that we have available to us.
But if I may, Mr. Chair, to
go ahead.
So I get the context behind that, and I think it might have been what Director Harwick was getting at. But again, if there are other partners, whether it's like city, mental health, etc., it would be nice, if we considered using our resources to again provide resources to the community. And I know that's something we talked about in our Vision Zero group. And Mr. Summers, I believe you were there during that conversation. But that was the context behind my question, just to understand, how much of that space has been contracted away. And I say space because I don't have a better word for it, or usage and what we might have. So I would also just encourage staff if we're not currently doing that. I think that that's something that the agency could certainly work toward or maybe partner with, particularly as our area is suffering some pretty severe social challenges. As a writer, I'm jealous when other agencies come up with cool creative stuff too, but that is something that I have seen at other agencies, and I would be happy to follow up with you know, our GMCO or you, Mr. Summers, with some examples that I've seen where that advertising space was also used to, you know, for essentially PSAs or public service or, you know, how to access resources. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I see no further hands raised. Going once, going twice, and gone. All right, let's transition to the second discussion item, which is a Group 33 fixed route service contract. And here to present that to us is Fred Worthen, Assistant General Manager, Bus Ops. Fred, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Whitmore. Good evening, honorable board members. I am Fred Worthen, Assistant General Manager of Bus Operations. Next month, we expect to bring to the board an approval for a recommendation to authorize the General Manager and CEO to enter into contract negotiations for Group 33. And I have a short presentation that I will put up on the screen. I always have problems or have fun sharing content, so let me just make sure I do this correctly. And presentation mode. All right. So as a bit of background, the district's legislative authority allows our fixed route, paratransit, and flex route services to be contracted by operations by qualified private business, nonprofit organizations, and local governments. The legislation caps the amount of service that can be delivered by a qualified third party at 58%. At this time, approximately 45% of our fixed route services and 100% of our accessoride and flex ride services are contract operated. These contracts represent approximately 56% of allowable contracted services. I should mention that contracting these services saves the district operational expenses as our contractors own or rent their own facilities, have greater flexibility in work rules, and have consolidated overhead costs such as human resources, payroll, and other support services that are managed through regional and national offices. Currently, our Group 29 contract is in the final year of our service options. Group 33 will replace the services currently operated as part of the Group 29 contract. Just for your edification, I really don't know how this started, but fixed route contracts have been historically referenced by numbers, starting with Group 1 all the way to the current Group 33 contract series. Fixed route contracts have historically been 3 base years with 2 one-year options. The current service contract up for bid operates approximately 285,000 revenue hours of service per year and maintains about 106 buses. Most services operated within the service package are in the north and northwestern section of our service area. There are not specific routes associated with our service packages, as our routes and hours operated are rebalanced regularly to ensure we stay within the 58% statutory service cap and to ensure that we deliver the most efficient services possible. Today's discussion is in preparation for a recommended action to authorize the CEO and GM to enter into a contract for provision of Group 33 fixed route services. This recommended action is anticipated to be brought to the Operations, Safety, and Security Committee on June 12th. If passed by the committee, it will come to the full board for consideration on June 26th. With that, I am happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Worthen. Appreciate the very factual but brief presentation as well. Always helps to get recentered on the numbers. So very much appreciated. Any questions for Fred in regard to Group 33? I do want to say I appreciate having the 1 month ahead lead time. If there are questions and items that we can cover, I think that's a good maneuver that we kind of talked about with planning for the work plan. So here. All right, I see no hands raised. Let's move to item 3 under the discussion category. And we have the September 24 service charges changes to talk about already. And again, we have Fred Worthen with us, and we also have Jesse Carter, our Senior Manager of Service Development. So gentlemen, please present the—
Chair Whitmore.
Yes.
Chair Whitmore, I see Director Ruscha's hand. I'm not sure if it was a delayed hand from the last discussion item.
All right, go ahead, Director Ruscha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I've been in transit for my appointment, couldn't find the button. I just wanted to request of staff before this comes to a vote on group 33. Would we be able to get a list of the routes that this contract covers, as well as like cost increases similar to what the board would have seen in the preceding contract, the one that this is following? Is that information that we would be able to get and digest before we vote on this next month? And I'm more than happy to send a old board packet as a point of reference if needed.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please proceed, Fred.
As I mentioned during the presentation, there are not specific routes associated with the service package. We move our routes around from service providers and operating garages based upon our service needs. So the routes are subject to change, but the jurisdiction and areas that they operate generally don't. With regard to providing other information, I'd have to defer to our legal counsel on what we can and can't provide with regard to cost and cost increases.
Ms. Schneider, can you assist with furthering answering that question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I make the recommendation that perhaps Director Ruscha submits a request in writing so we're really clear exactly what she's asking for, and then staff can appropriately respond to each one of those requests?
I think that would be reasonable. Plus, Director Ruscha, you could provide the example that you mentioned just a few moments ago.
Okay, yes, if I may, Mr. Chair, I will just forward a previous board packet. And that is essentially the request, if we get the same type of information. So if that works, and then if there's a reason why we can't provide that information anymore, in the response, then if you could just explain why not, if it was a previous practice, so that we have an understanding of what might have changed. But yeah, I'll just forward the packet. I think it's whatever the preceding contract would have been. So maybe 2019 or 2018. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, now let's move to item 3. Back to the Fred and Jesse show. Mr. Worthen, Mr. Carter, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Whitmore. Once again, Fred Worthen, AGM of Bus Operations. It does feel strange for me to have more than one item on the agenda, but tonight I will have Jesse Carter, our Senior Manager of Service Development, who will be discussing the September service changes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Worthen. This is Jesse Carter, Senior Manager of Service Development. As is customary with the fall service change, it's kind of a reverse of what we typically do in May. So we are proposing to, or recommending, that we return to a level of services that include additional tripper services to serve return to schools and other seasonal changes. Also included, and this is a little bit exciting for me, but not as exciting as the last portion of it, and that is the return of service that was detoured during the rail reconstruction project and the coping panel project. So we'll be returning to the service levels on the E and H line on the southeast corridors, returning to the 15-minute frequency, and also we'll be returning the L line into service, along with returning the D and H lines to the central corridor loop. Along with that, there are a number of other services that we are doing some running time analysis and minor service changes on, or minor schedule changes on. But most notable are some of the changes that we are happy to actually present, and that is those that reflect changes that are already in the systems optimization plan. So the first one being on the W line, we are proposing or recommending that the W line be extended, short-term trips be extended from Federal Center Station all the way out to the Jeffco County Center. And that will return that level of service to every 15 minutes. At the same time, we're also a new portion that we haven't done in quite some time, and that is adding 15-minute service frequency on the Route 40 Colorado Boulevard service. And that service would be all day on weekday. The final service change that we're proposing that is related to the SOP is with the 0 and 0B. And if I could, we did provide some information in your packet that shows the 0B, and that's a breaking of the Route 0, which currently operates from the Highlands Ranch area all the way to Civic Center. We are proposing to break that services into 2 different services. The 0 would continue from Inglewood Station to Civic Center Station, whereas the 0B would be a lower frequency service that would operate between Highlands Ranch Town Center and Inglewood. So with that, I also should mention that with the return to service or after the rail reconstruction program, we're also proposing to discontinue the midday service on the 0L and to return the level of service frequency 5 minutes, 4.5, 5-minute service frequency on the free mall ride by discontinuing the free metro ride. So with that, I want to open to any questions unless Fred, you have something else to add.
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Okay.
Chair Whitmore.
Gentlemen, thank you both. Director Lewis, the floor is yours.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to be involved at a function for Earth Day at 1670 Broadway, and I was able to meet a majority of the people that work in that building. I asked them if they used RTD, and I would say about 90% of them said they did. When I mentioned that the Metro ride was going to be reinstated, they were ecstatic. Because their main purpose is to get, I call it kind of like Wall Street there, you know, all the banks and everything on the near the 16th and Broadway intersection there. And I'm just kind of curious, can we put an asterisk next to taking away the Metro ride there in September if we see that it's a success? You know, we have 2 types of riders, you know, ones that are the tourists and may want to go down the 16th Street Mall and stop at every block. But we also have a working class there on Broadway that want to get to Union Station quickly. So I'm just curious if we can keep the Metro ride if it's a proven success.
Committee Chair, if I may.
Please proceed.
Director Lewis, that's a great observation, and we do recognize California Street, Stout Street, that whole area, 18th and 19th, as the banking area of the CBD. And that is part of the reason why in 2014 that service, the free Metro ride, was started, was to better serve that community as well. Because we were quite successful. I think the last place we ended up was about almost 70 boardings per hour on the free Metro ride. So we're excited about having that service turned on, and it is in the SOP currently that the return of the Metro ride is something that we're hoping to do by the completion of the SOP. However, right now I have to look to what resources we have, because I believe we dedicated an additional 10 vehicles to actually run the free Metro ride and taking that service away from the free mall ride. But we're very, very interested in seeing what level of ridership we actually gain from the free Metro ride, and actually very curious as to see what that demand looks like in the face of, you know, how things are going in the downtown area. So it's something we certainly should consider, and it's something we are looking at long term. It is, like I said, it is a part of the SOP, and I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Like whether the SOP or sooner. Thanks.
Right.
All right, thank you, Director Lewis, and to you, Mr. Carter, as well. Director Ruscia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. So this is for Mr. Carter. So as I understood it, our last changes had permanent changes, and that included the R line and those early morning runs. first, I just want to confirm that it's accurate, that is considered permanent. So I'll stop and let you, yeah.
Okay. Okay, committee chair, if I may.
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought I gave you permission. You always have
I'm sorry.
permission, Carter.
Okay, I appreciate that. However, I will say, Director Rusha, thanks for that question, and it should be clear. You know, I really have no power to say whether something's permanent. We are always making changes at any given time, and I do believe it is our wish to offer as much service as is well utilized and as is warranted. The trips that were discontinued, the early morning service, was to make way for the maintenance of way schedule, and that currently is still in need. So I would say that we're not proposing in the September service change to return that level of service, but it's something that's still open for future consideration as our situation changes.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, please.
Go ahead.
So to provide greater context, as we talk about utilizing the word permanent, recognizing that we're offering transit service delivery. And when one offers transit service delivery, you have to take in consideration a myriad of different factors. The changing environment, land use and development and things of the like. That's why it's so imperative that this organization do a comprehensive operational analysis with frequency every 3 to 5 years. And we collectively made a commitment with the board's action in which to do that, so we can double back and ascertain where is the potential for ridership. So with that as a backdrop, as we move forward, it's also important to note, as we look at the cost of delivering transit services, the bulk of one's budget is within a schedule. So as we go forward, to Mr. Carter's point, I want to reemphasize that it is our desire to provide as much service as possible. However, when we talk about where we are as an agency with the lack of investment in state of good repair and our preventative maintenance schedules, hence that's why we have antiquated PIDs on our platforms, because we weren't investing in our technology systems. And so as we go forward, we do want to endeavor to get to that place. But once again, as we need to do work relative to our maintenance of our right-of-way, that will be front and center as we move forward. So Director Rusha, as we proceed, we will assess the options to provide that service, but recognizing oftentimes people constantly reference the difficulty we have in recruiting operators. Once again, we have difficulty in recruiting maintenance of way personnel, recognizing that we are the only light rail entity within the state of Colorado. So provide all that to say, I wouldn't qualify it as permanent. We will assess as we go forward with each service change to discern what might be optimal from a service delivery vantage point. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, go ahead, or Madam CEO, go ahead, Director Rusha.
I could be chair for the evening if you like.
It might be up for grabs.
I just a closing comment. The R line is not even in kindergarten yet, and it does serve a lot of lower income populations, but it also is an essential connection to DIA and Anschutz for a lot of essential workers. I know it does share track with some of our older infrastructure, but I do have a concern that we are looking at reinstating even light rail service elsewhere from an equity standpoint when the R line is struggling as much as it is. It's also, I think, our lowest performing in terms of dropped runs and on-time performance. So if maybe like a follow-up memo that is very explicit and explains as to why the R line is not in immediate or long-term consideration in terms of restoring that service. I think I would appreciate that, and I can't speak for other directors who also share the R line, but I know it's something I hear about every week. So if we could just get some more information and rationale, that would definitely be appreciated from this director's perspective.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Proceed.
when we bring back our service changes relative for this board's consideration, we can include information relative to what it is that we're doing going forward. Thank you.
Very good. That would be helpful. Is that all, Director Rusha?
Yes, sir.
All right, Director Sloan, the floor is yours next.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Mr. Carter. I think the idea of having the W line with 15-minute headways on the whole trip will be of great benefit to people on the entire W line. And I would just like to show my appreciation for that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sloan. Director Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Carter, and your entire team. So what first of all, I take the AT bus, by the way, to go from 9 Mile to the airport. And when I do fly, and I absolutely love it. So thank you and kudos to everybody who operates that line. However, my question is about the AB, although I don't take that bus because I don't live in Boulder. But I have heard, first of all, congratulations to everybody in the 90% on time weekday performance. And it is popular from what I hear, to the extent that sometimes it is, quote, full. And so I was wondering how that also plays into the frequency and how your analysis goes forward about how many buses are put on that route and when.
Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'm looking at the Route AB and Route AT. One thing that I would share is that their actual performance in terms of boardings per day and boardings per hour are quite similar. Both those routes are doing well and have historically done well. With the AB, when we see that we are going to be in a situation where we have overloads, there are times where we put on extra service, as you know, when school is released and CU in Boulder, extra service is provided. But we are carefully tracking ridership trends on the AB and on the AT for additional service. At this point, we haven't seen the level of ridership that suggests that we should go above our current policy headway, but that is something that we're certainly monitoring it. It should be noted that our Skyride services, when we first began, had a very high fare, which was clearly identifiable as being much higher than even our regional services. And one of the common questions we had was, why is it so high? And it's because the amount or the span of service that we actually operate our Skyride services is very wide. So that's another challenge to the number of vehicles and operators that it actually takes to operate the AT and AB. So we have to be very, very careful in looking at adding services to it. At the moment, right now, I'd say give it a B+ in terms of its ridership and its productivity. But I don't want to move it down to a C or D by adding too many trips at this point. But we're certainly monitoring that, and I'm hoping that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. And perhaps this may be more of a question for Mr. Summers or Mr. Davies, but also intersects what you work on, which is as we have new developments going into, particularly as we see more TOD around the district. Is that something where RTD is in touch, and I'm sure you are, but I'm just maybe for the public to know a bit more about how RTD is in touch with different municipalities, different developers, about those different developments going in, some of which have quite substantial number of apartments, let's just say, and how does that impact our service changes? Thank you.
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
Proceed.
Recognizing statutorily speaking that our transit agency has to work in conjunction with the MPO, which is designated as Dr. Cobb. And statutorily, we have a seat at the table as it relates to the regional transit committee. And more specifically, utilizing the MPO for long range planning as we have to work in partnership. So with that as context, as we move forward, that's a critical piece as relates to how we plan and what we do going forward. And then more specifically, when we talk about a comprehensive operations analysis, when we leverage those, that is exactly what we're doing. We're working with the MPO and looking at other municipalities as they have the inside information relative to what is on the horizon as it relates for development. Will the agency do one offset as relates to one construction project? Typically not. But as we go forward, what we're doing, leveraging our engagement with municipalities and working with various municipal planning departments within local governments, that's how we ensure that we have an understanding of who's on first. So thank you very much for the question, sir.
And thank you, General Manager. I really appreciate that. I just want to end by saying thank you so much to you, to Mr. Carter, to everyone involved in this new service change. I think it clearly shows that RTD is responsive to input that we do get. And so thank you all very much. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Director Rosenthal. Board Chair Davidson, the floor is finally yours.
Thank you, Committee Chair Whitmore. Thank you, Mr. Carter and Mr. Worthen, for the presentation. Great to see the progress against the SOP. That's awesome and increasing headways. Thank you to our people operations. That's a big contributor here. I'm curious how close, based on the progress we're making on our people power problem, and as we're looking at these service changes, Mr. Carter, how close are we getting to the LX restoration?
Mr. Carter.
I'd like to dial a friend at this point. In actuality, the LX is high on the list. However, the number of employees we need to actually pull off substantial increases in SOP plans is something that is still challenged. However, we are doing better, but the LX remains very high with our North team and looking at changes along with FF4 and some other items that are very high on the list. However, unfortunately, we weren't able to put it in the September at this point in time, but we'll watch what our resources will allow us to do in the future. But the LX is one of those services that it has a strong following, but we're going to have to be very, very careful as we implement it, because it's one of those types of services that has a high cost from the number of vehicles necessary as it relates to the number of riders that we have. So, but it's still up there very high because we see on a regular basis requests for that service coming through our sales force and via phone calls. So it's high on the list. We'll certainly, it's in the SOP. We certainly want to do it, but it's going to take a point where we have a clear gain in the number of operators available for us to do that.
And I see that we have CEO GM Johnson with her hand raised, so proceed.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Whitmer, and thank you, Chair Davidson, for the question and Mr. Carter for his response. I just wanted to share with this body that it is our intent to have a presentation on the progress relative to our comprehensive operation analysis and what we foresee. And that should be in the fall, because it is a cross-matrix team that is working on this, and we will be better situated to address the questions which have been put forward relative to what is what and how we can deliver on that what, recognizing that we must look at revenue cost per hour as we go forward, because we wouldn't be good fiduciaries if we expended a lot of money to yield only one boarding per hour. It's not that situation with the LX, but holistically want to provide that information to this body. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Chair Davidson, any further comments or questions? All right.
No, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you all very much. All right, I see that we have no further hands raised, so let's move to item F, other matters. Are there other matters to discuss tonight? You know, I do not have any as chair. There may be a few, including one from Director Marjorie Sloan.
Right. And I'm hoping this is an appropriate way to bring this up. I did attend the finance committee last night and was interested in their dashboard proposal. And I know it's not purely a committee matter of getting the dashboard put together. But it appears to me that, you know, the finance committee is proposing this return on investment dashboard. But I believe the operations aspect of maybe the entire operations, safety and security has information that would really lend itself to the dashboard. And I don't know how that is working its way through the system. I know a dashboard is at the top of the mind of staff as well.
Appreciate the comment. I think it would be a worthy tool that we need to continue to flesh out. It'll be very extensive depending on the range that we want to capture. Anything from HR needs to performance and all the other things that we typically discuss. GM CEO Johnson, do you have any comments in that regard, or Mr. Worthen as well?
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Director Sloan, for the question. This was slightly touched upon last night, but recognizing there has been robust conversation around performance metrics and recognizing that we are trying to consolidate the information in a public-facing manner that is easily digestible. The conversations are ensuing at the performance committee. And I may be overstepping somewhat, but I will share that we have been working with the dashboard, and it's important that there is alignment amongst the board as well as myself and members of my team, that we garner a better understanding of what needs to be showcased. There's a myriad of statistics and data that we could put forward, but recognizing the emphasis as we go forward. So there'll be a point in time where we'll be providing information to the board for you all to discern what might be optimal to help you better address the questions that you receive from your constituents. So just share that to say, not lost upon us, because collectively we receive feedback from a myriad of different conduits, and we are addressing that collectively, and we'll have an opportunity to showcase what am I trying to say? I had a loss of words just now. Showcase our test page as relates to our dashboard at a performance committee that's taking place next week. So just gave you a little preview of what's to come once the packet is agendized. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Appreciate that update. Okay, I see a hand raised, Director Rusha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just here fighting for the R line again. I recognize that we have a people-powered problem. We have a shortage of staff and we have a shortage of light rail operators. But the R line is one of our worst performing lines in terms of dropped runs and like or cancellations and on-time performance. And so at this, I mean, I guess at this juncture, I would just ask, like, I feel like we need to answer for that. We need to have a plan or a new plan. You know, as it relates to our system as a whole, I worry that we are over-promising and under-delivering. If we do not have the operators that we need to deliver the system, the service that we're promising, the community and stakeholders are only going to become more and more frustrated. As much as I want more frequency and more, and, you know, restoring or looking at the original SOP, it is equally, if not as important to a rider, that you know your bus or your train is going to show up when we say it's going to show up. So I just, you know, I don't have a specific question, but I just wanted to bring this, you know, to bring this to the committee's attention, and also implore staff, if we need to make cuts, but our buses and trains are running on time, I think that's a consideration that we need to make. It would frustrate some folks. But for people who actually use the system, knowing your bus or train is coming is pretty critical. Particularly if you're like me and your bus only comes 1/2 hour. But if 15 to 20% of the time it's very late or not coming, well, you can imagine. So I just want to put that out there because I don't think it's fair to our staff or our GM CEO either. If we put folks in the position of, like I said, over promising and under delivering. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ruscia, for your comments. Director Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't see it on this concept on the Finance Committee's agenda for last night, and perhaps it was brought up in other matters. And I'm hearing a lot of discussion in the community and on social media about potential funds that RTD may be getting in the future, whether it's short, medium, and long term, to cover various projects, various services, potential services, whether it's in our region or how we interface with Front Range Passenger Rail, et cetera. And I'm sure that folks are working on that at the agency, but it's sort of concerning to me that folks are kind of already spending our money before we've even anticipated receiving, and we don't even know how much it's going to be and oftentimes when we'll get it. So I guess that's kind of my concern. And I was wondering, maybe a little bit of information from General Manager and about the process of the review of some of those bills and how we might be updated about some of the planning that we can do in anticipation of, as I said, short, medium, and long term. When we will get funds, for what purpose, and approximately how much we might be seeing. Thank you.
GM CEO, do you have any comments in that regard?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Director Rosenthal. Yes, I've engaged with staff as we talk about what lies ahead, recognizing that the governor is in the process of signing these bills. We do have a plan in place whereby we're going to look and ascertain what the deliverables are, who might we be working with, and that information will be conveyed to the board. So you guys are clearly aware of what's happening, recognizing that, we're on the hook to deliver a report as relates to what we're going to do about fast tracks, right? So there's a myriad of different things, and we are tracking that as that's part of the core business duties that we have. So we will ensure that you all are apprised. Thank you so much for the question.
All right. Thank you very much as well. Secretary Guzman, floor is yours.
I'll actually defer to Chair Erickson, or sorry, I did it again, Chair Davidson, because he might have something more important to say than I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary. I am often David Erickson in my life, so no worries. I just wanted to address Director Rosenthal. Thank you for the question. General Manager CEO Johnson, thanks for addressing that. Also, I just wanted to, since there were a number of bills that did discuss funding, I thought it might be good to highlight our Government Relations Officer, Michael Davies, sent us a helpful email on Thursday, May 9th that contained some information. SB 2432 is one that was notable around the $5 million. Initially, we had gone for $14 million, 7 for Zero Fare for Better Air, 7 for Zero Fare for Better Youth. What was in the bill ultimately is 5 for a grant program we'd be applying to. And then, as General Manager and CEO Johnson was mentioning, it's a bit too early to determine some of the other impacts. The SB 24-230 was the oil and gas fees. There's some helpful information out there around the formula funding that's been speculated, but a lot of that still has yet to be ironed out as well. So I just wanted to put a finer point on a little early to know the formula funds, but the SB 32 bill did have the $5 million. Thank you. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right. Back to Secretary Guzman.
So, Director Tisdale, please correct me if I get any of this wrong. but last night we did discuss the upcoming fiscal policy discussions that we are going to need to have as a board. We began talking about some of them in our committee so that we can work towards bringing fuller, more fleshed out recommendations to the board through the agency. And so Director Rosenthal, I would really recommend watching that video or, getting on that transcript because there was a lot discussed in our packet last night. It was a very long meeting with a lot of detail. However, it's really important with respect to the idea that people want to spend the money that we are responsible for. And in particular with our fiscal responsibility as a board, that we are the body that decides what happens with this money as of right now. And so we have to make the decisions that are best for the people that we serve without regard to what any person, single authority in any other department of government wants, because we have to serve the public that pays us to be here and elected us to do our job. I want to say that because I also made a comment last night about that very same thing, which is we're the ones that decide. And nobody likes it, but they all want to tell us exactly how they think we should be spending this money. And they're not sitting in these meetings going through details on routes, on changes, on service changes, on bus information, wayfinding, getting the barrage of comments that we get, trying to figure out how to get people to the light rail, how to make all of this work. And when they presume to think they know better than we do, and they don't have the slightest clue about what they're talking about, it's really frustrating. But that comes from our fiscal policy. So being mindful that those conversations are forthcoming. I just would invite everybody to pay real close attention to what our fiscal policy says and get real comfortable with it, because we're going to have to make some tough decisions.
All right, thank you, Secretary Guzman. Back to Director Rosenthal.
Good, thank you. Sorry for the second bite at the apple there. Perhaps, Madam General Manager, you are an ex officio member of the Front Range Passenger Rail. Is there anything you might be able to report to us about, any meetings that you've attended, that anything that may, not be something that we've been reading about in public or what have you, something that, is germane to as we're going forward? Anything from Front Range Passenger Rail?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Proceed.
So recognizing that I do have regular meetings with the general manager of Front Range Passenger Rail, and I engage with members of the board. I do have a meeting slated to take place in the next couple of days, recognizing the legislation that will be signed by the governor tomorrow relative to us working in tandem about optimizing the operational efficiencies. And so at this time, I don't have anything to report because that meeting has yet to be had, but quite naturally, when session concluded, we coordinated because the joint letter in which Chair Davids and I sent to the general manager of Front Range Passenger Rail and to the board put forward our willingness to ensure that we were leveraging opportunities for those efficiencies. And we are still committed to doing that. And then more so recognizing that all of this rests on the Northwest Rail feasibility study, which is the basic foundation of making any kind of determination as it relates to a path forward. So that's all I got for you.
Thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it very much.
Thank you both. Director Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just because my name was invoked, I wanted to ratify and reaffirm the comments made by Finance Committee Vice Chair Guzman relative to the discussion, and encourage people, as he mentioned, to follow closely the finance policy discussions that will be coming before the board next month or the month after, I believe, somewhere in there. And that's important. The other thing is to clarify for the record, my understanding, which I would like to have some affirmation on. As I understand it, the way the legislature ended their session, we did receive the funding for free fare for youth. which I think was earlier described as free fare for better youth, which I like that. That's a good line. I'm going to remember that one. But free fare for youth, I think, was approved in the amount of 5 million, whereas the free fare for better air, as I understand it, did not end up getting funding through the legislature, leaving us with a decision point at some point. I suppose not making a decision answers the question, but I just wanted to clarify that that's how I understood the session ended. And I think I'm getting some head nods, but I defer to the chair. Thank you very much.
Ms. Johnson or Chair Davidson.
If I may, Chair Whitmore, to address Director Tisdale's question. So as it relates to zero fare for youth, yes, there is that $5 million. That is eligible for reimbursement as long as the program takes place for an entire year. So I just wanted to provide that context because it's not as if we just get it. We would proceed, and I'll keep my opinions to myself. You know, I'm really excited about that program. Thanks, bye.
All right, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Anything to add, Chair Davidson?
No, that covered it beautifully. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. I do not see any more raised hands, so we will conclude other matters. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. And Operations Safety and Security Committee meeting will be considering a number of items on our work plan. Slated so far as recommended action on the Group 33 contract services that we discussed earlier this evening, and also funding action required, and also obviously to be discussed for access on demand. Additionally, we have two discussion items. First is update on the Vision Zero working group that Directors Ruscha, Harwick, and Guzman have been working diligently on for a number of months and leading that effort. And the second is a semi-annual RTD-PD update. So with that, and seeing no other action, I will declare this meeting adjourned at 7:23 p.m. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon.